Inviting me. It looks like the old man on the panel, among the panelists here is going to start. The young ladies will leave for later. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with you some views on Rio. As I heard that not everybody is equally familiar with Rio, where we are and how the process runs. Matthias, as always, has also asked me a little bit to dive into history and to say what this is all about and what the process does look like, and maybe to provide some insights on how the informals go and how this whole negotiation process down the road here in the buildings of the UN are proceeding. Maybe some words on me. I'm from the German Federal Foreign Office, posted to New York since July 2010, so I'm here for almost 2 years now, and mainly working on second committee, that means social and economic committee stuff in the UN. And currently, of course, one of the main things I'm doing is the preparation for Rio. This conference is Rio+20 for a good reason. It is, as it is the usual habit in the UN, a review conference, reviewing 20 years after the Rio conference in 1992, which was the starting point, if you don't count the 1972 conference, the Earth Summit. If you count 1992 as the starting process for this Rio process, which has initiated a lot of environmental conventions. Rio is the starting point for the 3 so-called Rio conventions, which is the UNFCCC process, the climate change negotiations, which is a very painful process, you all know, the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and UNCCD, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. So these 3 Rio conventions have seen the light of the day in Rio 1992. And what we are doing now is a follow-up process. That was 1993, the creation of the Commission on Sustainable Development, which was created by the UN to follow up on the Rio conference, and on a yearly basis, when states come together here in New York, to see into progress in certain sectors, which the Commission has been looking at into every year, to see how the Agenda 21 is the name of the program which was adopted in Rio, how this is going to be implemented. So this Commission since 1993 is working on a daily basis, sorry, not on a daily basis, of course, on a yearly basis. It has 53 member states according to regional representation, and is looking into the review process for Rio. Then we had Rio+10, that was in 2002, of course, the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Johannesburg, which has adopted the Johannesburg Plan of Implementation. And now we are at Rio+20, 20 years later, at the invitation of the original host of Rio, Brazil, again in Rio, where the whole process started. This process is not a completely new one. This process has already been, well, officially, so to speak, announced when the General Assembly, which has to adopt a resolution in order to create a conference, or to make a conference happen in the UN, in 2009, so at the end of 2009, the GA adopted a resolution to hold a conference in 2012. So you see this process is ongoing for almost 2.5 years now from the adoption of the resolution. And we are now approaching the end, but a lot remains to be done in the next 4 weeks till we all go to Rio, because from June 13th onwards, the PrepCom, the third Preparatory Committee, will work in Rio. So the conference has 2 themes. One theme is the green economy, and I think this is something we will talk about here, because all the things you refer to also have a lot to do with green economy and with transforming the world economy into a greener economy. Green economy within the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. A long title, sounds a bit difficult, sounds maybe a bit, well, interlinked, but of course also, or already, let's say, the definition of this theme is a very political thing, as you might imagine. So in order to have all countries agreeing to this kind of title, it's a bargain. It is really difficult to get there. Simply green economy, and I will come to this later, is something where many countries have a huge problem with. Asking what is green economy? We have other problems in the world than green economy. We have other priorities. We have to focus on poverty eradication. So that is why the title that has been agreed in the end of 2009 is green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication. Also to make clear that green economy is not a completely new concept, is not something that is completely different from sustainable development, but it is an instrument, is a tool to achieve sustainable development, and sustainable development is of course also a tool and has as in the center poverty eradication, because that's what development is all about. It's about poverty eradication. It's not about green economy, at least not in the first glance. And the second theme we are dealing with is the institutional framework for sustainable development. Meaning, how does is the UN ready to, in an optimal way, an efficient way, deliver sustainable development? Are the institutions in the UN ready to really deliver on sustainable development? The answer is no. The question is how to optimize them and how to do this better. And that is the second theme of the conference, institutional framework for sustainable development. And the abolition of this commission I already talked about. The Commission on Sustainable Development is some of the key issues, how to replace it and how to move it better into the UN system. But I will come to that a little bit later. Just on the time frame, I said this resolution was adopted in December 2009, 2.5 years ago. Then what does the UN do when it creates a conference? You have to have a bureau, that's the first thing. A bureau is a body where all regional groups are represented on an equal footing. That means the 5 regional groups in the UN, the Western and other states group, the Eastern European states group, the Asian group, the African group, and the GRULAC, so the Latin American group. They all send 2 representatives to this bureau, and the bureau is there to arrange the conference, to do the organizational work, to decide upon procedures, and, for example, to also deliver the text, which is the basis for discussions down the road. So very important, that was created then after this resolution. It has 2 co-chairs. It's the ambassador of Korea and the ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda. And these 2 ambassadors have a very heavy schedule and very busy day, since at least particularly over the last weeks, because they have to make sure that this conference will be a success. And as you can imagine, this is really not easy. So we have this bureau which is constantly working to ensure the conference success. Then we had a second PrepCom in March 2011, where all member states came together and said what they expect the conference to be, what are their main objectives, what are the things they would pursue. And on the basis of that, it was decided that all member states, in writing, deliver their input to the bureau. Here you are with the bureau, and say in writing what they want the conference to be all about. What did the bureau do with all that? They produced a so-called compilation document, more than 6,000 pages. It's online, only online, because this is going to be a green conference, maybe. At least a paper smart conference, so not everybody is printing the 6,000 pages, but you have 6,000 pages where you can see all states, all countries, many NGOs, many regional groups providing their input and saying that is what we want Rio+20 to be all about. That is what that is what we expect from this conference. And you can imagine this ranges from poverty eradication to more money. This ranges from greening the economy, from more sustainable energy for all, to women's rights. This ranges from improving good governance to creating a new UN environmental organization. So a lot of things which have been compiled into this 6,000 pages document. After that, and now the Bureau again has a key role, they tried to make a 0 draft, because the conference is of course there to discuss, the conference is there to bring people together, but heads of state and government also want to decide upon something in the very end. So they need a paper where they're saying, we head of states and government decide this and this. And the Bureau then produced a 19 pages 0 draft out of these 6,000 pages compilation, and saying, well, we might imagine this is what member states could agree on. 19 pages where heads of state and government should say, we commit ourselves to eradicate poverty, we commit ourselves to transforming the world economy into a greener economy, we commit ourselves to fulfill our promises we have already given in 1992 at the original Rio conference, for example, to increase development aid to a certain level, where you all know also developed countries have a huge problem, including my own country. Let's be frank, let's face it. and so on and so forth. So we had this 19 pages document, and now all member states come in. And we had the discussions of the zero draft. The first one end of January, where first views were presented by member states saying, well, we like it, we don't like it, we would like to see other aspects be more prominently put into the zero draft or others be deleted. And we had a second round of informals end of May, where we ended up with almost 250 pages. So out of this 19 pages, by all amendments, asks for deletion, mainly amendments of course, because many member states, everybody comes and want to see my issue is the most important one, whether it's blue economy for small island states, or women's rights for the Nordic countries in Europe, or the indigenous issues for people from Latin America, or of course a lot of the technology transfer, development aid and so on from G77. All this blowed up, I say, the document to 250 or 270 pages. And now the task we are facing down there is to make this again a readable document, a precise, a concise one, where in the end also the public will read it and our head of state and government can say, well, this is something reasonable. So what we are working on, and we have done this in the 2 weeks, end of April, beginning of May, and we will have another round end of May, is to reduce this text to readable size. We are now down again to 150 pages, and we hope we can end up with maybe 20 or maybe 30 pages at the end, but there's still a long way to go. Let's face it, this sounds very bureaucratic and a very administrative and a painful process, and indeed it is. If you sit in the negotiations for 9 hours a day, the last informals went from 9 hours a day, from 10 to 1, 3 to 6, and 7 to 10 p.m. again. And you don't make a lot of progress, because even if the co-chairs try to present text which might be acceptable to all, we ended up with 21 paragraphs to be agreed so far, and more than 400 not being agreed. You can imagine the bulk of work which is still ahead of us. And of course the paragraphs which are still open are the most critical ones, the ones that talk about technology transfer, the ones that talk about abolition of subsidies, the ones that talk about, for example, the institutional reform, that talk about the fulfillment of promises developed countries have given when it comes to official development aid and so on and so forth. So there's still a lot of work to do. But let's face it and let's be clear, Rio+20, it's a conference we have every 10 years, and it represents, of course, an opportunity we only once have in a decade to advance the issue of sustainable development and to move forward. And in Germany's view, this we should, of course, and we have to reconfirm the commitments which we have taken in Rio, but we have to look further. Let me say something on the role of Germany in the EU. If you like, later you can take these papers here. The EU has produced some outreach papers where you might find some key messages and positions of the EU on Rio. You can grab them if you like. Germany is acting in the EU, so Germany is not speaking as a member state of the UN, like most G77 countries also, but they coordinate amongst themselves. That makes the process, of course, in the plenary much easier, because instead of 27 countries of the EU, there's just one speaker, that is the EU. And even more important for the developing countries, the G77, consisting meanwhile of 133 countries, they also speak with one voice. So the coordination takes place amongst these political groups, and then we speak. We speak as the EU, we speak as, or they speak as the G77. Imagine 133 countries speaking, we would never end somewhere. So that is, of course, a helpful process, and it's also true for the EU. We try to coordinate ourselves and then bring in a common EU position. We see as the EU, let me turn it a little bit to substance, not only talk about process and organization and procedures.